Good morning, everybody. Michael the Maven. Today, I'm going to be giving my 2 cents onto the Sony A7R Mark IV that was recently announced. Many of you have asked me for my thoughts and comments on it, as well as why do my reviews always take so long to come out? Okay, so there's 2 parts to this answer. In regards to the press events, I do not go to those press events. As a personal point of view, I just feel like the company is too involved. And I also have problems accepting things from companies. I get emails every single week from companies offering to pay me money for a review. And there are some YouTubers that say yes to this. For example, when we saw the Peak Design tripod launch, many of those influencers who tested the tripod, they were actually paid by the company to do so. In my mind, that is a conflict of interest. And the word review to me means that it's unbiased, it's objective, it talks about the positives and it talks about the negatives. Now, every YouTuber draws their line in the sand a little bit differently. And so legally you can go, there's just requirements about disclosure in your video. You have to tell your viewers, what was received, things of that nature. And it just, for me personally, I'm not comfortable doing it. And I know it affects my views. I know it affects the subscribers because my information's always late. Credit to the camera manufacturers. They have been very clever in figuring out how to leverage YouTube. But for me personally, it's always going to be late because I have to buy the camera just like you, or get it from a sponsor once it's released, like B&H Photo or Lens Pro to Go. So I hope that answers the first question in terms of why my reviews are always late. I like to do my own testing. I don't like to take pictures that have been set up by a company. There's no way that'll ever happen. However, when we're talking about the A7R Mark IV, I have some very important comments about it if you're considering this camera. The questions you should always be asking: what can this camera do for me and at what cost? If you cannot answer all questions in a positive way, in terms of a positive response, you shouldn't buy the camera. So for $3,500, do you have a need for an additional, 15, 16 megapixels over all other cameras out there? There are people out there who do. I have friends who would love it for that exact reason, and it makes sense for them. But when I look at the A7R Mark IV, I see its strength as its primary weakness. And what I say that is that when you start dealing with very high resolution megapixel cameras, the file size also increases and it would slow my workflow down. So there are specific reasons I would use the camera, but it's not part of my normal shooting. So for me personally, I'm probably going to pass on it. The A7R Mark III was more than enough for anything that I needed resolution-wise, but the camera I use more than anything is the A7 Mark III. Why? Because the resolution is smaller and the file size is also smaller. I'm shooting on it right now. It's a great camera. So that's kind of my thought, is that Sony is becoming more aware of the need for specialist type cameras. High resolution. Word on the street is Canon's coming out with an 80 megapixel camera. Maybe we'll see another one. Fuji's already come out with a 100 megapixel GFX. So we may see more and more of these higher resolution images. Some of the other positive things about the camera include the fact that you can see the focusing square, and the pixel shift sounds amazing, although I'm hearing it's a little bit finicky. Now, I've been shooting with Sony cameras since about 2014. I've shot with every major Sony alpha camera since that time, and I can tell you that they have some weaknesses. I've posted a video about it, but consistently, time and again, this is what I see on Sony cameras. Number one, the menu system does not have a touch screen to interface with it. That is some low-hanging fruit, Sony. I think that would be one of the first things that I would address if I was in your shoes. The usability of the menu systems is a negative. The rack zoom problem that we're seeing in sports focusing, I've seen it on almost every single Sony camera. They have issued firmware updates to fix it in the A9. We've also seen it in the A7R3 and the A7 III. All the other Sony cameras, even the A6400, there's a rack zoom problem. Talking about video stuff, they tend to overheat. They tend to have moire. They tend to have rolling shutter. There's also an 11+7 delta posterization artifact when you are using compressed RAW files at lower ISOs. You will not see it in compressed RAW. But there's also this problem of star eating that we've seen on other Sony cameras. In regards to the A7R Mark IV, I think the real winner is anybody who's looking for an A7R Mark III, because those prices are going to come down. And the recommendation I would give is try out an A7R Mark III before you make the jump to a super high megapixel camera like the A7R Mark IV. The reason why I go through all these things to mention them is because this is consistent with what we've seen on other Sony cameras. In most of the pre-release press event reviews of the camera really don't talk about the negatives. They only talk about the positives. And for me, that's not really a review. That's more of a commercial. So pay close attention to the reviews that are giving you negative feedback. $3,500 is a lot of money. So in any event, I hope that answers your questions. I will definitely shoot it when I get it in my hands. Just know it's going to be a little late. And that's the reason why, is because I have lines that I draw in the sand in terms of what I will and will not review under certain circumstances. Something else I need to point out is that no camera company has ever had the guts to send me, Michael the Maven, a pre-release camera. I would test it if they sent it in the mail, but no one's gonna do that because I am willing to talk about the negatives, and that should say something. That challenge stands, and I'm waiting for a camera company to step up and say, okay, yeah, we'll send it. Hasn't happened yet. In any event, just know that I have your best interests in mind. I am willing to talk about the negatives, even if it costs me views and things of that nature, even if it's late. I am being absolutely transparent, and I thank you guys for your support. I'll definitely have a review coming on it at some point, but it's gonna take a little bit of time. In any event, thank you guys so much for your support, and I will see you next time.